Did you know that nearly half of Americans say that dating is harder today than it was 10 years ago? While, let's be honest, dating has always presented challenges, love and relationships seem even more problematic today than they ever have in the past.
Dating can lead even the most well-adjusted person into feelings of uncertainty and vulnerability.
Let's examine these barriers and difficulties in more detail. Hookup culture. Now, whilst I don't judge anyone's personal choices or lifestyle, I think it can be harder to sometimes figure out exactly what the other person's intentions are. Like if you're on a dating site maybe and you're there because you want to find a partner, you want to find someone to commit to. Is everyone there for the same reason as you, or are some people looking for something more casual? And it can take a little bit of time, I think, to figure out, are we on the same page here? So that can also lead to a lot of hurt, can't it? Especially if you do get to the point where you're on a date with someone, you think it's all going well, and then they break the news that they're looking for something else.
Yeah.
You want a relationship and the other person doesn't, it ends there. Period. That's it. You're not on the same page. Actually, you're on opposite pages. And what gets us in a trap is thinking that we can get them there.
I guess the suggestion is to try and clarify this before you go.
Yeah.
But it can be so awkward, can't it?
It can be awkward.
But also I think, you know, with the text-based communication, it leaves you open to so much potential to miscommunicate on these things.
It's so easy to get the wrong end of the stick, isn't
Yes, it is. Leaving the online world aside for a minute, just thinking about life today, we live in a culture which values independence, self-sufficiency, and it can be quite hard for people to be vulnerable, I think.
I think two things are true at the same time. Sarcasm and passive aggressiveness and yelling aren't healthy ways to ask for what you need or desire. And I bet there was a time where you did ask in a nice way, didn't you? You were vulnerable and you tried to talk about what you were feeling or what you needed to feel close and connected to your partner, and you were dismissed, weren't you? You were ignored, invalidated, or mocked. And if that was you, I just want you to know it makes perfect sense why you're hesitant to be vulnerable again. It's understandable that you feel like you need to yell to be heard. It makes sense why you feel like there's no point in bringing up my feelings or needs because it only leads to more pain. And it's only natural that you're starting to detach from those unsafe relationships emotionally or physically. But if this is a relationship that you actually want to stay in, then I think we owe it to ourselves to continue to advocate for our needs as long as it's safe.
The next one is previous negative experiences. These Americans who took part in this survey were dating 10 years ago, so of course they're going to have had experiences since then that maybe haven't all been wonderful. It can be really hard when you've experienced some kind of trauma or some really negative relationship, or even, you know, you were desperately in love with someone and they didn't feel that way back, or maybe they left you. It can be hard to resolve those issues before you date again and without bringing them into the new relationship.
My non-negotiable that I did not waver on was you need to be done with your ex. I do not have the fucking patience for people that are still dealing with it, still hung up on it. Oh, it's unresolved issues. No. Put it to sleep, learn your lessons, process it, and move on. It's time to make space for somebody new and stop holding on to people that didn't work out.
Technology and social media. While technology has made it easier to connect with people, the tech and social media side have also brought up their own problems associated with it.
A Hinge study found that only 1 in 500 swipes resulted in the exchange of phone numbers.
And that's before you even get to the part where you've called each other, it's all gone well, and you then make a date. That's a lot of swipes.
A lot of swipes, yeah, get that repetitive strain.
Yeah, it makes you wonder whether one day, you know, this generation will get the repetitive strain injury.
I call it swipe wrist or something.
Yeah, swipe wrist.
Even eHarmony, I think this is for you.
Swiper's finger.
Swiper's finger. Even eHarmony says that you're more likely to find a relationship through a mutual friend than you are online.
Oh my goodness, that's being honest. I wonder if they meant to say that.
I don't know, that might have been leaked, I'm not sure.
So lots of things to worry about, you know. What do I look like? Am I fanciable? Now, like having your profile pic, say, out on a dating app or social media in general, you compare yourself to others. You're thinking, is this my best look? What happens when they see me in real life and I don't look quite like my profile picture?
These Americans that were surveyed as comparing dating now to dating 10 years ago, you know, your body's obviously very likely to have gone through some changes in that time.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. I think social media can sometimes promote unrealistic expectations because everyone's putting their best side out there for the most part, or cause comparisons that aren't necessarily favourable, and that can obviously steal you of a lot of your happiness. If you're seeing all these couples maybe who look like they're super happy and super in love, or people just living their best life, and that isn't what's going on with you. I also think social media opens us up to negative interactions. When people get behind a keyboard, they can very often not be the best selves. And the other thing about people behaving badly behind the screen is it doesn't just come in the form of bullying. It can happen in the sense of ghosting, where people just disappear suddenly, breadcrumbing, where they're kind of stringing you along with just enough contact to keep you interested but not really intending it to go any further.
If you're dating someone and everything is going great, there's a nice connection, there's really good momentum, and then all of a sudden something shifts. They pull away. They're not as engaged with you. Maybe they're not calling you back. Maybe they're not texting you back. Like something has definitely changed and you can't figure out what that is. And then you start to get anxious, as anyone would. And you get in your head and you start to analyze every single moment that you had together, analyze them, and you don't say anything. You don't say anything to them. You just sit with this anxiety, hoping that somehow you could win them back or things can get back on track. I don't recommend that. I recommend breaking that pattern. I recommend speaking up and literally just straight up saying, hey, I noticed you pulled away. What's happening? And this is how you keep up a standard for yourself.
And then, of course, there's things like unsolicited pictures, things like that you know you might receive online. It can be quite a frightening, world in a sense.
Yes,
you know.
I think so, yeah. I was just thinking, you know, with texting as well, how many times do you text? You know, how many times a day? And if you send a message and the other person hasn't answered immediately, and you keep checking and they still haven't answered, you know, there's all that to contend with. Whereas before, you know, you might have arranged to go on a date back in the day, and you know when you're going, you might get one phone call, but you don't get constant little messages all the time. So you think, that's fine. But nowadays, you know, it's all this texting that's going on.
Yeah, and it can be really hard when someone has different expectations of how much you'll text. Like, this happened to me so many times. You'd start talking to someone and then you'd be like, I have to go or whatever. And you'd come back like a few hours later to hundreds of messages. Where are you? What you know, after very early on in the communication.
Warning bells.
I know, and I'm not saying it's just men that do this at all.
Oh no.
I think some people get very addicted very quickly, or you know, they need constant feedback and constant reassurance, and that can be very challenging too.
Here are 3 ways to actually go slow in dating. Going slow in dating doesn't mean that it's an excuse for bad behavior. That doesn't mean that you guys just never see each other or never talk. What it means is you're not expediting the stages of a relationship quicker than they need to be, so you can actually give the opportunity to fucking get to know this person. What a concept. The first thing I want you to do is start to implement for now after all the sentences that you start to create after a great date. They're so amazing for now. I'm so excited about this person for now. All we have is right now. So every time you start to go and create these narratives and this whole idealization of who you think this person is and the fantasies and all that stuff, bring yourself back to the present moment. I like this person for now. I don't really know that much about them, and we will see where things go.
Busy lifestyles. Doesn't it feel like people are busier than ever? That can make it very hard to kind of foster genuine relationships and close connections with people.
That's why a lot of people have chosen to do things like meditation and stuff like that, because we don't often just sit. I never do. I'm terrible. I'm always doing things. It's hard just to let go and then focus on maybe your relationship.
And I think because life is so full of these little distractions, you know, like the phone's pinging, emails, it can be very hard then, I think, to give your full attention to a date sometimes.
That's very true, because a few years ago we didn't have phones, so when you went out or you were at home and you'd finish work for the day, you could just focus all your attention on what you were doing or who you were with.
That's right.
But now it's like, I've got to get a pee. It's hard to resist, isn't it?
Yeah, and I always dislike when I'm out with someone, unless they specifically say they're waiting for a call, where they have their phone like here and they're like, listening to you, but like they're checking it. I'm like, why am I even here?
Yeah, I hate that.
And I think that can maybe be something that blocks people getting to the next stage of a relationship after dating.
Well, it makes you feel like you're second, doesn't it? You're not really worthy of giving their whole attention to.
No. The next one is changing or evolving gender roles and expectations. Don't get me wrong, in some ways I think this is fabulous.
Oh, yes.
But I do think in the past it's been kind of obvious what you do on a date. You go out, the guy will pay, the women will look appreciative, and that's what you do, at least in
My date.
Yeah. Now I think it can be a bit of a minefield for new couples to get their head around what the kind of expectations are of each partner. It can take a little longer to settle into what is my role.
Yes.
And it can also be harder, I think, to find people who align with your views, because people are very divided on this. Who should pay, who should take the lead, who should ask the other person on a date, who should arrange the date. People have very different ideas about how this works.
Yes.
And it can be quite hard to find someone who is compatible with your viewpoint, your kind of worldview on it, I suppose.
Yeah, it's so good that everybody now has been given a right to be who they want to be. I know there's still huge problems and attitudes to change, but it does bring with it thoughts on, look, how do we deal with this change?
Yeah, exactly.
Which it should rightly do, but it's one more thing to think about, I guess. Human beings are social animals in the main.
Yeah.
Part of our needs is socializing with other human beings. And nowadays, so much of that socializing isn't really socializing in the truest sense. It's online. I think people are losing the skills to interact with each other and are missing out on lots of the pleasure of interacting with somebody face to face. And also all the hours you spend swiping away, it's hours and hours some
Can
people
be.
spend. Yes, so it's a lot of your life that you're actually sat there on your phone
Exactly.
and not doing other things than entering the real world, who knows?
We've all experienced the kind of time suck of dating apps, maybe, or social media, where you're like, oh, I'll just check my phone. And then like half an hour's gone by and you're like, oh my God.
I know.
It's amazing where the time can go. That's another drawback, I think, of the whole kind of social media, internet-based socializations as well, is, you know, we can lose so much of our life to these things.
And we're not as productive as human beings, are we?
No, you might feel like you're being productive because you've answered all your messages. But, you know, I mean, it's not quite the same, is it?
Do you think dating is more difficult today? And if you do, please tell us why. If you don't, please tell us why too. It'd be very interesting to hear.
Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, then please give us a like, maybe share with a friend, and hit subscribe to follow us on YouTube.